Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome back to the Citizens Chat Show. We are streaming live here at the official Civic Space Studios. My name is Masesa Demiano, and today we're discussing the Uganda's investment climate. And joined on the panel today is a team of my experts, and right close to me is Akankunda Brenda. She's a trade and investment policy analyst with SEATINI. Brenda, you're welcome.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be on this show.
Yeah, you made an appearance here, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And I'm glad to be part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And from Brenda, we have Godbar Tumushabe. Godbar is the Associate Director with the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, but also a coffee farmer. Godbar, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Demian and colleagues, and thank you, our viewers.
You're welcome. Godbar, again, you're welcome. We now about the fourth or fifth time?
Yeah, always happy to be here and to be associated with the Civic Space TV.
Yeah, that's understand. And then our regular panelist, Dr. Sarah Bireete. She's Executive Director with the Center for Constitutional Governance. And she also a farmer. I don't know from where.
Consumer of coffee.
And a consumer of coffee. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, and finally is retired Major Awich Pollar is the Director External Services with the NRM, but also a regular panelist.
Did you say retired or tired?
Tired, retired, which is which? Which? You're welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm retired.
Not tired.
Very active.
Very active.
Very active.
So nice to be here.
Yeah, and good to always see you. You've been missed on the chat show. We hope we can have you more and more often. Hope you've cleared all the other schedules of your work. Thank you. And today being a conversation on that is on the coffee deal that is making headlines, we're also trying to appreciate the entire Uganda investment climate in Uganda. And of course, Uganda is extremely a resource-rich country with great potential to develop into Africa's top investment destination. Uganda is reported to have improved at ease of doing business, ranking 127 from 135 out of 190 countries. This is a World Bank report of 2019. And straight into the discussion, I would want to invite our government here, Awich Pollar, to just tell us just the general scope of the Uganda's investment climate today.
Thank you so much. The general view of Uganda investment climate is good. In there, we have the superstructural and infrastructural matters in. The superstructural, if I could say, is that we have the laws in place. We have the Constitution, which protects people's rights to private property and other rights. We have many other enabling laws that protects property and promotes people's rights in property ownership. We have rights that protect investors, laws that protect investors, and as far as revenue, whatever it is, the procedures they are in. And we have rules and regulations, which are very available. So that is a superstructural aspect of the investment climate. The other part is that the infrastructural is that government has tried as much to work on roads, to avail land for investors, to avail security for investment, so the real infrastructural facilities has been put in place. Therefore, both the superstructural and infrastructural facilities that has been attempted to put in place, therefore makes the investment climate sane, serene, and good. Of course, it goes without the challenges they are in, that we live in a global village economy. So the challenges that affects one part of the globe will most likely affect us. And therefore, like a family, I would expect that things are not that sweet. Something, one or two ups are there, but I think as government and as the people of Uganda should always be on the lookout to see those sticking out issues. But all in all, the investment climate in Uganda is good. And I think we call on local investors to continue investing and foreign investors to continue coming, because it is only investment that we have the production of goods and services, and it is only that that we generate wealth, and that is when we can improve the welfare of our people.
Asante sana. And Brenda, you...
Definitely,
Yes.
before, we get Awich off the hook,
Yes.
I would like to know, do we have laws that protect Ugandans from investors?
Well, there are laws, of course. Laws generally regulate relationship. Laws regulate relationship between persons, and laws also regulate relationship between the state and persons. So without delving into each particular law that is there, but we have laws, for example, you know that there are provisions under the law of a threshold of investment, that if you're a foreigner, you should not go beyond this. And there are some, what I could call ring fence activities that should be for the locals. So I think those are the laws that I could easily land my fingers on, the laws that protect Ugandans from other foreign investors. But all in all, there are laws as a general principle regulates relationship between persons, and therefore you go into which categories of persons, and laws regulate relationship between the people and the state.
Generally. Interestingly, Brenda has kept shaking her head in a disagreement. I would want to invite you, Brenda, to just, since you're into policy and almost this is your area, you just shed the light on the climate, the investment climate in Uganda, in relation to us also what Fund has just talked of, the laws that are regulate the sector.
Yeah, thank you very much. When we look at Uganda's investment landscape, it is very pertinent that we have to talk about the policies that govern these investments. I entirely disagree with the Funde saying, pointing out that we have activities ring-fenced for local investors, because that is one thing as SEATINI we've always advocated for, to see in our guiding legal framework that governs investment, which is the investment code. But also on the issue of rights protection, what we've seen oftentimes is that the policies we have in place, both at the national and also the global level, is that most of them are skewed towards protecting the foreign investors. And you'll find, and I would give you an example of even this controversial agreement that we are discussing today. When you look at it, it in no way talks about the obligations of maybe the farmers or the state. It focuses on the gains that are towards the foreign investor in place. So for us, the way we look at it is most of these agreements and policies are skewed towards protecting the rights of these foreign investors. And that, in a way or the other, leaves out the foreign investor. But we think that probably it should be turned around. Investments shouldn't be looked at from just that angle. I think it's very important that we should see these policies we talk about having issues to do with human rights. I entirely disagreed with him when he said these investments, the policies we have in place, speak about protection of human rights. Investments in Uganda are majorly governed by the investment code. The investment code is very silent on issues to do with human rights. And in fact, we've often been advocating to see, for instance, a human rights impact assessment being considered or incorporated within our investment laws. And that is the guiding legal frameworks. Two, we have we sign investment agreements, bilateral investment agreements, multilateral investment agreements, but the same challenge still stays. And like he says, we do acknowledge that there are those global dynamics that affect not just Uganda, but cut across. But even at the global level, what we've seen is that countries in the global south are usually left out when it comes to especially focusing on rights protection of these people. And like for us as SEATINI, we run a campaign that is dubbed Life Before Profit. Because what we see is when we talk about investments, what comes as the peak is how much are we getting from this investment? What are we getting in return as a state? But we are not considering those pertinent issues. And I think it's one of the major challenges we've seen regarding this investment environment. Oftentimes, you see people being chased from their land. This time round, we have the National Budget Framework paper that the theme talks about commercial agriculture. You know what that means is we're going to practice agriculture on a large scale. What it means is that you who has land on a small piece will definitely have to maybe move away so that we can be able to have a large scale where we shall maybe give land to one investor to set up a plantation. So we look at it as a way, in a way of it focusing on protection of the investor themselves and actually not local investors. And still, like he talked about the issue of local investors being protected. The sector, we do understand that we operate in a liberalized economy. The sector has been opened up that a Ugandan and maybe someone coming from the United States can all compete in the same sectors. So there's nothing to talk about ring fencing in all the laws we actually have as a country, and especially within the investment code because it's the governing one. So I think that our investment landscape is just skewed towards, it's just looking into one end, which is protecting the investor who comes in place. That's why you see when we look at a certain person trying to maybe come in and talk about investment, we are so excited to an extent of we are offering a lot of incentives because that is where our interest is as a nation. But we don't look at, for instance, maybe how is this contributing to improve the livelihoods of the people, the community where you're setting up this particular project. Those are the things we don't consider. We don't have that impact assessment. And even when we talk about maybe impact assessment, a little times when we do, we're just maybe talking about environmental impact assessments. But we leave out what is so key and which is the human rights, the social bit of it. And so I think that is a gap that still exists and maybe something that needs to be addressed for us to feel that we are even benefiting highly from this environment and trade landscape.
Interesting, Brenda.
Excuse me.
Yes, you want to ask a question? Yes.
Sarah talked of not leaving me off the hook. So I thought she should also not leave her out of the hook. Now, she raises the issue of the human rights and she feels that the government is so silent on it, which I don't think so. Most investment agreements have human rights component, but in practice, I know for a fact that a road in Kamwenge, the investors in construction industry, they stopped them because of issues to do with human rights, especially child rights, with the girl child, which were around there. A similar thing.
How were they stopped? We had to petition the World Bank headquarters.
Yes, but that is within the
Uganda
jurisdiction of
government
Uganda.
failed.
You see, when you are a state Sarah, when you are a state Sarah,
from government
you know, when you are a government or a state, you don't only own the wrong that comes. You own everything that comes within your jurisdiction. So if there are procedures of petitioning and you do it, it is within the government.
We petitioned
the same
government.
thing is in Lira. The Lira Soroti, the corner Kamdeni Road. That is now a big issue which led to demonstration. That road was stopped because of human rights issues. So all these are incorporated, and there are many instances where investors have been stopped because of violations. So if government did,
You see, Afande, I appreciate the fact that, yes, there are many ways through which we can be able to access justice. And I think we shouldn't be a country that just waits for a moment where the Bireetes have to come out and petition. I think this should
even that
should come down to the policies we put in place.
A system.
But you see, I do appreciate that it is, like I started with that, But I think it's important that even when we are coming up with these laws, like I kept on emphasizing the investment code, I think it's important that we think about probably the repercussions that investments could have on the environment, the community. And we plan for them. We set out those in our policies, not having to wait to maybe rely on the other sources of law, because probably something that is not catered for in the investment code, we can still be able to go to court and maybe rely on another source. But I think it's important that in these that govern the investments, it's important that we have them clearly stated, so that it is not just having to go to court and then the best lawyer gets out of it winning it. I think it's important that we set it from the start when we are coming up with these policies.
Yeah, interesting. Brenda, I need to bring in Godbar in that line. Godbar, you so much into investment, especially in agriculture. I want to call you a local investor at this point. Do you think there is a level playing field between you, the local investors, and the foreign investors?
Well, as a farmer, between Brenda and Pollar, I am hearing a lot of English. as a farmer, I'm really hearing a lot of English, because these things, we need to break them down, where, at a very, very basic level. Yeah, so you can have laws, you can have policies, but then you only begin to appreciate the relevance of those instruments when you see how are they operating in real times. So I'll take different examples, and I can take like 3 of them. One is that a national investment regime is able to attract foreign investments. And in the way you articulate this regime is to actually create a level playing field for investors coming into the country to be able to take advantage of an incentives regime. So in other words, whether it's a regime of tax exemptions, access to electricity, road infrastructure or rail infrastructure, as Pollar said, and many others. So they are basically, it's more or less like a blank check, because as a government we've said these are important for people to make investment decisions come into our country. So that's, for me, that's number one. Number 2 is what I would call strategic investments. So in many cases, there are certain sectors where you may not find, especially private investments, because the scale, in terms of the size of the investments, but in terms of the financing that is required, may not really be amenable to market incentives. That the investment is so big, it involves a lot of risks. It takes a lot of time to recoup your money, and therefore, but yet it is strategic for the country. So that's the one area where governments come in and then provide very special incentives to attract specific investments. But even then, if you have disciplined governments, normally they are going to subject them to competitiveness. There's competitive bidding. So we want to build a standard gauge rail to connect with the Kenyan rail, for example. And then we're able to say, for investors coming into the country and they are interested in investing in this area, this is the package that is available. I think one obnoxious thing that our government keeps on doing is to single source. Basically, you go out there, you get a company called Tumushabe and Associates, and you say, we have given you these incentives to come and build the rail. I think that it's a wrong way of doing business. And our history, the history of investments under this NRM regime is littered with all the failures of these kinds of investments. Right from the company called Westmont Asia that was sourced to buy UCB. And you know how the story of UCB ended. I think we had the company that bought Dairy Corporation for $1. We've had all the divestiture program. They are investors that were single sourced, and all of it ended in tears. So that's really at the strategic level. I totally agree with the idea that for any serious government, there are certain sectors where you have to take deliberate actions. I don't think that utility sectors like electricity, like water, like telecommunications, like banking, that you should just leave it to the vagaries of the market. As a state, as a government, you have to come in, but you have to come in intelligibly, not mafia style, the way this junta of Awich do. You don't want to, you have to come in intelligibly. Finally, is then to go to the local level. An investment regime that does not inspire and motivate your people to participate in the economy is really is a half-baked regime. There is no country out there that should be developing an investment regime, and the primary business is to attract foreign investors. No, I think that's foolhardy. As a practitioner, because I think I've tried a series of investments. I tried to build a school, and I couldn't manage to get access to finance to build my school. I've done part of the investment, but you reach a point where you find that you need to source financing to be able to materialize the investment. And I think for many people, I think there are cases of many people who have tried to invest in education. They go for commercial bank loans, and eventually they lose their investments. So in other words, at this moment, there is hardly very properly structured financing for local investors who want to do to pursue their business ideas, and they do it. The rest of the things, and I mean, I need to be modest on this one because I may not really be fully possessed with the knowledge, but at the time I have tried to get financing from Microfinance Support Center. I wanted money for agriculture. And the person that I saw gave me a checklist of about 20 things that I needed to provide to get the money to do agriculture, to grow coffee. And one of the things that was, I needed to produce a marriage certificate or an affidavit. I'm like, but really, I'm going to grow coffee? So you want me to produce a marriage certificate or even go and swear an affidavit that I'm not married? I think that it's way out of their range. So I have tried to get financing from the Agriculture Credit Facility, Bank of Uganda. Every time you say there is no financing for agriculture, the government technocrats say, we have money in the Bank of Uganda for agriculture. And I can tell you, all the trials I have tried, all the time I've tried, you realize that there is no clear pathway. So when you talk to people within the commercial banks, they're open to you. They tell you, no, actually, because the SCF facility, they're supposed to lend that money between around 8 to 12%. But you see, commercial banks have their own money, which they lend at about 24, 25% and above. So basically, these officials tell you, say, there is no reason why we should be lending out cheap money where we are getting a smaller return in terms of administrative costs when we have our own money. So in other words, there is my experience is that there is no deliberate effort on the part of the banks to promote access to finance for let's say, for the agriculture credit facility. So in other words, the investment infrastructure for local investment, from my personal perspective as a practitioner, and I think I consider myself to be averagely knowledgeable on these matters. I find it completely obscure. because once you leave the formal ones, then you go into the patronage schemes of a Myoga. Now the big things, the Awiches would be telling us parish development board. So if you want to be an investor, there is money for parish development board. All this is mumbo jumbo that we've seen all these programs coming up year after year, right from 2000. But if you look back and say, okay, what has been the game-changing investments that came out of the Youth Livelihood Program or the Women Entrepreneurship Fund or any of these funds? I really would want, as I said, I want to be modest and assume that I'm not absolutely knowledgeable about the outcome. I would want people like Awich and others to tell us and say, there is this fantastic idea that because youth got money from Youth Livelihood Program, this thing is just moving. It's the game changer. That's what
they absorb the percentage of unemployment.
Absolutely. I would want to hear that. All I hear is a lot of mumbo jumbo explaining failure, and I'm always open to learning and understanding. But for myself as a practitioner, I think the investment climate and regime for the local investors is completely distorted. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. Maybe which will later guide on that. But Sarah, after I'll have to invite you in. But Sarah, I want you to just shed a light on the how far government has done to boost the investment climate of Uganda. Have they done enough?
Yes, they have done.
It's a painful question to answer. We do a lot of talking. And if we were to compare the speeches on investment, on the economy, and the NRM, we would not even get a room in the library where such speeches would fit. So President Museveni as a motivation speaker, he has done well as a motivation speaker on the economy. But in terms of practical investments and development,
we shall find a drone to answer this question.
But in terms of practical development to the economic lives of Ugandans, I would give him maybe 30%. Most of the things that have happened to Ugandans economically under President Museveni, they would have happened without him. And they have nothing to do with his motivation speeches. At times when people are calculating GDP growth, it's like saying, I have a family, I have 10 children. But what is the quality of those children? In terms of household incomes, we have, of course, economics can be fun at times. If somebody wanted to speak theoretically, they can make a case for economic growth. But if you ask Ugandans how their lives have changed in terms of the talk, then you get lost completely. Even Ugandans that were doing far better, even amidst war, even amidst the Idamine, they get lost in terms of the economic situation today. So maybe what we have had is a creation of the new rich who have benefited from the systematic political corruption. You have the billionaires who always rush to government to get free taxpayers' money. You do not have the original billionaires, the likes of Mzee Basajja, the father of the current Basajja, that would make economy, that were engines of entrepreneurship. You can hardly find them. After the death of Murwana.
The same bull is...
yes. The likes of Murwana that had nothing to do with the taxpayers' money and connections. You cannot find them today. If you go to Chukuba and you see Yanga, Rubega, you find them all moving with the crowns of people, bodega, pass here, pass there, and they are calling somebody. If tomorrow you say who is the engine of growth in the economy, the same applies to coffee that we are going to discuss today. We have 12 million Ugandans employed in the coffee sector. But the 1.7 million small scale farmers, I know Godbar is a large scale, is out of that.
I'm small scale.
It's out of that one small scale farmers. You know, originally you would produce coffee and you have the coffee marketing board working with cooperative movements. They purchase your coffee, they provide agricultural input and technical and otherwise. They help with the drying and protecting the yields. They had storage at parishes. And we had systematic, you know, marketing chains, production and marketing chains for produce. The same was applied to the investment of the road infrastructure. Or even railway. We had to construct a railway to Masesa to collect copper. We had, you know, there were clear lines of development. There are minerals in Karamoja. But do we have any deliberate network to stabilize that region? We can only stabilize if we want to pick cobalt, gamma, and the rest. And most of it is smuggled. It's not even documented. Then when that goes, you can go to hell. We shall take the battalion to Somalia and leave the Karamjongo wrestlers to kill each other. They can as well finish each other, and then we have minerals. So we have this kind of leadership, which I think beyond talk is really not bothered about the welfare of ordinary people. Of course, they are preoccupied with survival. And then when they create these artificial regime billionaires that can bring in money or take it out, and that is open money laundering. The biggest chunk of money laundering in this country is by government, including that Vinci, Enrique Reddy. That's of government money laundering schemes. So this is what we have beyond the beautiful motivation speeches.
Interesting. Awich, do you want to
Yes,
respond
I
briefly
want
before we go to...
Yes.
Sorry.
Maybe I'll make an overarching comment, especially when Godbar wonders whether all these other interventions has practically led to what he called the game changing. We have had, is it Bonaba Gagawale? We have had so many interventions methods. His question was, has it really been tangible? You see, it has been tangible, but it's not difficult to clearly assess, especially if you don't have the data in your hand. But the overarching comment I wanted to make is that over time, World Bank and other independent data processors assert that the life expectancy in the country has improved. From this year, we used to live as short as this, we live now like this. World Bank has assessed that the percentage of people who have grown out of the poverty threshold has gone up. Now, all these two indicators and others, that people now live longer, is not by any miracle. It is all these interventions, Bonabagagawale and on all these. So, if you wanted another session to clearly state out this, but as a state, all these interventions are thrown out there. The final product is how it really impacts on the livelihood of Mugisha, Okello, Tumusime, or some. Is he living for tomorrow? Is he living longer or shorter? So this is the overarching comment I wanted to make, that these interventions crystallizes into a livelihood of persons. And the data are there to prove.
Okay, just to get into, I know you, Godbar, you want to respond
I want to respond to that comment by
yes,
Awich.
but as you make that comment, I want us to go a little deeper. Before you respond to him, you're going to give us a brief about the brief background about the coffee sector in Uganda, but also because Sarah has kept on hinting on the coffee deal that was happening, and I would want you also to dig deeper into what that deal means for Ugandans, but also importantly for the people who are directly in the business of coffee.
Yeah, no. So at a general level, Awich, it's quite striking. Maybe not striking. It's a normal phenomenon that almost every country has had its GDP, other macroeconomic statistics really pointing in the positive direction. So in other words, if you are a country like Uganda, you want to be able to see how different are we from other countries, because for us we have been doing other interventions. I can guarantee you that if you look at the data for DRC, which has been at war, a big part of it at war for as long as since 1996, you'll find that the GDP has grown, per capita income has improved, life expectancy has improved. You can say that of Cameroon. There's a time, I think that was around 2018, when they were publishing GDP growth statistics, annual GDP growth for African countries, and Sierra Leone, like 2 years after the war, was growing at 20% per annum. So in other words, if you are looking at the fastest growing economies in Africa, they will tell you Cameroon. Some of the regime apologists actually will tell you that Africa is doing better than any other part of the world because Africa has the fastest growing GDP per capita. But you see, Sierra Leone can grow at 20% per annum. Canada needs to grow only at 0.2%. And that could be maybe about 10 times the size of the economy of Cameroon. So in other words, these statistics that Awich is sharing, they are good. They make good, I think as Sarah calls it, good motivational speeches. They really make it good because you look good. The fact that life expectancy has improved, if you break it down into the micro aspects and you look at, okay, sir, what about the under 5 mortality? What about the mothers who are dying while giving birth? At the macro level, the statistics are very exciting. At the micro level, when the mother who has died giving birth is your neighbor or your relative or someone you know, it makes you more humble than the motivational speakers. Having said that, really, if we go back into the coffee business, I think myself, like probably many of us here, maybe with the exception, Brenda looks to be the Generation X. Yeah, the DRA, the descendants of the resistance. Yeah. So, but essentially, the point I want to make is that many of us are part of the coffee culture in this country. My generation, Sarah's generation, the generation before us, we are part of the coffee culture. You can look back with nostalgia about coffee. You look back and you say, if there was no coffee, there is no way I would have a shot at the kind of life that I live today. And you can look back at the infrastructure that made that coffee happen. Yeah, the cooperative movement, the coffee marketing board, notwithstanding their inefficiencies, because these were always there, like they are there today. There are always those deficiencies. But I know that my uncle who paid school fees for me did not have to worry about school fees. Because one, he was guaranteed that the local cooperative society knew that our coffee production would be at no less than 50 bags per year. So in other words, they were guaranteed that my uncle or our family would be taking up to 50 bags of coffee to the cooperative society. Yeah, and so that's the culture. We carried coffee on our heads. We knew how to dry it. I mean, we knew how to dry it. We even knew how to test the water content using our teeth. We didn't have the machines that test water content. So you dry the coffee and you reach a point, you just take off the husk, bite it with your teeth, and you will determine that this is now dry. And you take it down to the...
Biting the husks?
No, the seed.
The seed.
Hey, yeah. We would know this is the required water content. Because our art of managing coffee in our family, in my uncle's family, was so perfect that the local cooperative society knew that from Mr. Rugama's family, we get quality coffee, which is well dried, which is proper water content. So they would come and sample one bag and just say, pass. Other people would come with the coffee and they say, this one, the moisture content is still high. So they send the back, take back for drying. The nightmare actually about coffee was getting into the society, and the guy, the inspection manager, comes and says, your coffee is not well dried, carry it home. That was a nightmare. But that's the part of the culture. So where we are now, the coffee, there are lots of distortions that have happened because of the collapse of the cooperative movement. The dissolution of the coffee marketing board, the entire liberalization regime, where all of a sudden the biggest player and the biggest beneficiary is the middleman. For some reason, they happen to be men. Actually, they are no middle women.
One has come now.
Now we are. This is the first time we are getting a middle woman.
Yeah. It has caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah, the Vinci. But essentially, just to emphasize the point that we've seen the entire market architecture of coffee changing, with the middleman becoming the most prominent person or the most prominent player. And we've seen one of the interesting phenomena that's happening is the mushrooming of coffee hurlers. So very different groups of people, mounting coffee hurlers. So in other words, our people in their own small ways trying to add value by selling clean instead of chiboko. So for me, my experience now is that when you look at when you do the math, because I have sold coffee, clean coffee, I calculated and said, if I sold chiboko, because these were small volume, chiboko is the coffee that is still in its husks, the dry coffee berries. I realized actually the difference between selling chiboko and clean is not that significant. But for the farmers, an ordinary farmer feels like, no, I've made something different. But that's the changes that are taking place, and they are phenomenal in my view. Then we've seen the elites, if I can characterize myself and a couple of others, Bob Kabushenga, Ian Clark, and others, going into coffee growing. Now, we are shifting the size of the shambas from the traditional 2 acre, 5 acre, so now moving 10 acres, 20 acres, and more. Yeah? So that's another change in the industry. To be fair enough, I think UCDA has played some significant role in trying to move the industry by trying to encourage the production of seedlings, licensing nursery bed operators. Also, I think that's one area where there is absolute room for improvement. So I think that there is a lot that is happening in the industry. So at this moment, the signing of this deal with Henrik Pinetti and Uganda Vinci Coffee Company is for me more or less like a slap in the face on Ugandans who have changed this industry to where it is now. Because you see, remember, there has been a cascading events. Normally, when we talk about the Vinci Coffee deal, it looks like a standalone action. But as a policy analyst, I always look at the circumstances. So I look at the Uganda withdrawing from the International Coffee Organization, and I'm like, that I still have not bought the explanations given that Uganda needed to move from the International Coffee Organization. Because I think these international spaces, they are spaces where you can negotiate if you know what you're looking for. The problem is that if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll be held hostage there without any influence. So we saw Uganda withdrawing from the International Coffee Organization. Then we saw the enactment of the Coffee Act. There are certain things you can't legislate, or you don't need to legislate. One of the unique characteristics of the NRM regime is that it loves laws, and yet it is the primary law breaker. The regime, spends too much. It's a serious law breaker.
But
all
because
its people,
they need to control other people.
Yes, all the actors in this regime, they spend more time and money trying to circumvent the law than to comply. But when it comes to enacting laws, they are like, wow, this is the best thing that we are doing. So even when they are accounting for what their performance, they say, we enacted this law and the other one and this one and that one. So the Coffee Act, a lot of the things that you want to do in coffee to improve production, to improve quality, to encourage value addition, there are more incentives they are more to do with voluntary compliance. They are not things where you go and write a law like in criminal law where you say, if you kill someone, we'll kill you. That's not the way you regulate agriculture production. There isn't much that the government can do on my farm. No matter what laws they have, there isn't much they can do. But you see, if government had accessible finance for me to do irrigation, and I know I can walk into Microfinance Support Center or Centenary Bank, and I'm able to sign off the next 500 million shillings and put about 20 acres of coffee under irrigation. That way government has improved coffee production. But for you to legislate and say, if we find your coffee unmarched, you have committed an offense, that's silly. Yeah, that is silly because it doesn't work. Me, some of us, I even have a right that even when you say, because some of stupid things that governments do, that they can even say, when you cut a coffee tree, we'll take you to prison. You have committed an offense. So so if I leave it and don't look after them. So the point I'm making is that there is a lot that coffee farmers and Ugandans have been able to do to move the coffee industry to a different level. There is a lot that can be done if government chose to do the right things. The one that they have done on value addition with this deal is the third one. So get out of International Coffee Organization, enact the Coffee Act, and then give this package of incentives to the Uganda Coffee Vinci Company. I think it's. There has been a lot of debate about this deal. Yeah, so we can discuss the merits and demerits of the deal itself. But before we go to the merits and demerits, we need to figure out, is this what is needed to give Ugandan coffee sector another boost?
Interesting.
Yeah?
I think it's a discussion we are going to get onto.
Okay.
We need to first get into the break, then we return. The conversation running right now is on the Uganda Vinci Coffee Limited deal with the government of Uganda. It's a conversation that is happening. It has been happening throughout the week, and we've also joined into the conversation to just add some more weight onto it. And this conversation is running live on our Civic Space TV YouTube handle. You can be part of it, subscribe there, comment, make all your posts known. And also we're on Twitter, chat show UG, the hashtag, and also on Civic Space TV hashtag. Please be part of this conversation. Let's have a short break and return.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from the short break, and we're here discussing the Uganda's investment climate, but importantly, we're trying to understand the Uganda coffee deal with the Uganda Vinci Coffee Limited that is happening and making rounds into the discussion, the spaces of discussion today. And joined on the panel is Brenda. I have Godbar, I have Sarah, and Awich Pollar, who've joined into the discussion today. But we finished the part of the investment, and of course, Godbar opened up the discussion on the coffee deal itself, being a coffee farmer. I would want to invite you, Sarah, into the conversation.
Of the Vinci.
Yes, of the Vinci. And I want to ask, who stands to benefit from this coffee deal? Are we anywhere as Ugandans benefiting from this deal?
Maybe what is
Well,
the
I
deal first?
think,
What is that deal?
but before I find the president usurp the functions of the moderator. Yes.
Some of us don't understand it.
No, the key facts about the Vinci deal. One is that it was contracted without involvement of stakeholders, and the citizens out there need to be reminded of the national objectives and directives of state policy in the constitution, and the mandate to involve stakeholders and make sure that the dealings of government benefit citizens. So we have had expressions from key coffee stakeholders in the country. There were no consultations, including bypassing the line minister, the Minister of Agriculture, who was the first actually to denounce the deal. The agreement also has abnormal incentives, including 10-year tax exemption, free land in Namamve Industrial Park, but also a guarantee that if anything happens, including a shortage in supply of power, including anything not expected happens, the Uganda government has already apologized and the taxpayer will pay.
Yeah.
So
And all the taxes.
I think they just fell short of saying that even if the Vinci lost his breath, then Ugandans will be punished. Very, very outrageous. In part 4 of the agreement, on the details of the project, the agreement creates a monopoly on supply of best quality of top seeds and guarantees that the Vinci will first get the supply they need before anybody else can be contracted to supply coffee. And in fact, the agreement nullifies all other export dealings that were there before 10th February. And that is the monopoly that the stakeholders have been talking about contrary to our liberal economic policies as a country and a free market economy. The agreement also was proofread by the Attorney General. We know that under the Constitution, Article 119, the Attorney General is the chief legal advisor of the country. But the Constitution further in the same article mandates the Attorney General to proofread and advise on interstate and bilateral agreements. And the Section 29 of the Interpretation Act gives the duty to review and advise on contracts that the government signs with people like investors and MOU to the Solicitor General, not to the Attorney General. And the Solicitor General is on record to have said that he was never consulted and he never proofread that agreement. So if you put all these fault lines, and many others really, as you read the details of the agreement, you just see ill motives just on the conduct of government. You know, we have a principle that we call the conduct of man. You know, judging the criminal element of people based on conduct. So if we were interrogating the criminal element or the hidden agenda of the people that procured this agreement, all these are indicators of acting in bad faith by the people that procured this MOU. So you have the Minister of Finance signing the agreement. Even the agreement that you're holding, if you look at the last page, the leader that is now famously known as the Vinci, like the historical character, that was mean, that was childless, and so selfish in the historical character of the Vinci. You have her signing as a witness. She jumped. So technically, she's not a party to the agreement. She appended her signature as a witness. And this might create some technicalities if you want to pursue legal action. And that could have been deliberate, also imputing the criminal intention of the Vinci. The space for the parties to the agreement. So Uganda government is a party alone in this agreement. The Vinci is a witness and her lawyer is a witness. So you might drag out court and she says, no you can get, yes, she's not a party. She's a mere witness. She's not a party. You can extend the copy for the government representative.
I thought Sarah Awich represents CINRM, not government.
I know, but we call him government. So technically, it might raise issues if she came up with the defense and says she's not a party.
So who is liable now?
But Sarah, actually, I think that in effect, that agreement does not exist.
Yes,
Who's
the government has signed their own. The government has
Where is the witness?
the witness is Moses Matov, company secretary, UV. Then this one, in the presence of Enrica Pineshi, just see.
No, you can
there is no party.
So the party is there.
You show me
It
where
is
the
blank.
party appears.
Yes. So technically, it raises all these challenges, and that can impute criminality on the part of the people that procured this thing. She could be dodging liability legally.
So Enrica Pinteni should have signed here.
Yes. And where did she sign?
Because she was supposed to sign as a board chairperson.
Yes, and she was supposed, that would make her a party.
Yes.
But now she's not a
She
party.
would make the company a party.
The company is a witness to this staggering. They are not a party. So you have all these actions impute criminality
Could it be that the
face value.
mission is out of ignorance?
No. It is intentional.
Or that she
I think
didn't know where to sign
Sarah is
exactly.
saying the omission, I think, can be two ways. One, it can be intentional, as Sarah is saying, but it can also be an act of God to save Ugandans from this
agreement. It does not exist.
Yeah, it does not exist.
So
because she could have skipped where she's
No, she could be a certified
could have done it
mafia,
professionally.
dodging responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting.
So you have all these elements. And you try, as much as you try to find elements of good faith, of acting in good faith, or doing this, you know, the PSST was saying this is the best deal that Uganda could ever have got. You try to look for elements of goodness in this agreement, and you fail to find them. But also for the benefit of the viewers out there, it is important to underscore the fact that the characters in this agreement are the same characters in the botched or fraudulent Rubowa Hospital deal.
Yeah.
In the Rubowa Hospital deal, Ugandans had to guarantee through promissory notes and with the approval of Parliament a loan of 1.3 trillion shillings to the same lady Da Vinci. And $300 million have already been secured on that guarantee. And that is a risk out there, Ugandans, that you might have to pay. But also, in addition to the guarantee, the Ministry of Finance has already advanced 378 billion in addition to the promissory notes to the same woman for Lower Hospital. What exists on the site of Lower Hospital is a tampered with ground, one truck parked, no contractor, no workers. And we have spent all this money. And that goes back to the investment climate. What do people invest in Uganda? Especially those procured through the first family. What do they invest other than their faces and photo moments? You have colored people presenting their face, taking pictures, and the rest is taxpayers' money that is squandered through government money laundering.
Interesting. We also saw Akon coming and was given some good chunks of land somewhere. He's also an investor, by the way. Soon we'll see the contract in there. But Awich, I wanted to, maybe would want to understand. Where are local investors in such deals, in such incentives that are given? Why don't we see that the people like Godbar out there?
Which looks worried.
Yes, could benefit
involved
because in this contract you see that the almost 100% waivers on everything. I've not seen any contract that possibly a local investor benefits as much. Where do you leave our local investors?
Okay, I'll address that, and I'm not setting my own question, but like Godbar says, he observed my body language, and rightly so, that I was worried, but I think I was concerned. More than worried, I'm really concerned. I must admit that I haven't really drawn my attention to this coffee agreement. I have a soft copy. No, I've been busy. I have a soft copy. But I have also heard, I don't know whether it is true, that the movement caucus will discuss it. I am a member of the movement caucus by the fact that I'm a director at the secretariat. So I sit in the parliamentary caucus, even when I'm not a member of parliament.
Direct external services, the people who outsource the investors.
The Secretary General,
yes,
the Deputy, National Treasurer and Deputy, and all directors are members of the caucus, just like we are members of the Central Executive Committee. So either way, if it comes in the Central Executive Committee or Movement Caucus, I would be privy to the discussion. And since I already said I had not paid attention, I have only the soft copy. That's why I was concerned and paying attention to this, so that when I do my further studies, I would be able to talk at an appropriate time in an appropriate forum. But what I was thinking...
What is the appropriate forum?
Like the Movement Caucus and the Central Executive Committee. That is the forum I'm talking about. Now, one thing that I had that was tickling my mind was who are the parties. But I think Sarah tried, because I was saying, if government, my interpretation of law of contract was, it's an agreement between two parties.
Two or more parties.
Two or more parties. Now, if government had its coffee somewhere and it is giving to
To
the
the
Vinci,
person,
then let it be. I did not think that it would even bind Godbar,
Private,
who
yes.
has his coffee to sell. So I wonder now how
The monopoly
the
in
construction,
cross-flow.
I don't know how the construction of an agreement between two parties is twisted to also bind non-members of the party.
Exactly.
So that could be an interpretation for the agreement. But I would think that government could have in its stores somewhere, whether in the Sese Island,
Somewhere.
Sese, Kalangala, or somewhere, to give to the party that it is contracting. So that's what I was thinking
Maybe on
about.
that point, let me read the section 4 clause 421 of the MOU. Coffee supply. Government undertakes that it will take all reasonable measures to give priority of supply of coffee to the company before registering any contract or acknowledge any agreement for the export of coffee beans, including screen 18 and above, so that the company will have ample supply of coffee to sustain its operations.
Would it be, for example, that
That's the most evil
would it be,
clause.
for example, that now that government and sign agreement with this lady,
No, with nobody.
it would.
It has signed with nobody.
Okay, fine.
But
Let's
witnessed
say
by
that-
someone.
Let's take
For
it for
argument's
this.
sake,
For
we can
argument's
say
sake, with
with
this,
somebody.
did it anticipate that in future it may sign with X, Y, Z? So they're saying before we sign with X, Y, Z, this is a priority. I'm arguing this because I'm saying if Godbar is not a party to this agreement, can't he export his coffee? That is what I'm trying to say, to look into.
So let me, maybe, if I can explain to Awich and our listeners, our viewers, this implies, you see, the government comes in as a regulator. Government uses a number of instruments to regulate business of different forms. What that provision means is that if Teleco Farms, my company, applied for a license to export coffee, government can easily deny you the license until this company
is satisfied.
has gotten its volume of supply. That's basically the implication.
Then
And it also says that previous agreements are not binding
So
in exporting coffee.
In other words, in practice, you may apply for a license and you may actually be entitled to a license, but because of this agreement, the licensing authority can even play you over and delay the approval of a license and everything because they have a commitment elsewhere.
For 10 years.
To deal with this company.
Renewable.
So that's the implication when you start thinking about it in practice.
So it is now by implied, not expressed. Yet,
But
fine.
it is
Then let's see how it
expressed.
goes.
It is
What I was
expressed.
saying-
I have explained that it is expressed.
It's expressed,
That
clearly
for
expressed in the
government of
MOU.
Uganda to license you to export coffee, more importantly,
Subject.
as quality of screen 18. Screen 18 is like the
top,
topmost.
the cream.
Yeah. These are the big size seeds.
Yes, and going by last year's yields,
Yeah.
the cream is 8,000.
Yeah.
Is it what? You measure it in what? And the lady is entitled to 6,000 of that 8,000.
Like tons or even
Tons, yes.
So in other words, Awich, we're saying in the first instance, it is explicit that for us to license another company to export or another person to export, we have to satisfy
The
that
demand.
Henrik
The Vinci.
Da Vinci
It's
has
not complaining.
He's not complaining. But in the event that this looks problematic for the enforcement, the licensing authority can also use its discretion to frustrate you as an applicant for an export license.
Or even registration.
Yeah.
You see, we have the burdensome. Register farmer, register.
Okay, whatever it is, I've already said that I've not studied that. I hope that it will be discussed at some appropriate forum, as I said. But I should think that you have said that I'm not for the government.
Are you running out from the truth?
What we are saying is that as a party, we form government because we are the ones as a party who have a contract with the people. We go win election as a party and we form government to execute the manifesto that we have. In fact, we are supposed to periodically, every ministry is periodically supposed to give us a review of what they have done in complying with our manifesto.
Under what law?
Under what law?
As a party.
For us to get a review? Well, I can't figure out the law now, but that is the practice we have. We give government targets. We told the people.
We told the manifesto, maybe implementation unit.
Actually, which is explaining this very well. Because you see, what you are seeing as this agreement is part of what I call the NRM regime state capture. The NRM as a party, which operates really as a junta, what it has done is to capture the government and the state of Uganda. So that's why you hear that the government of Uganda must report to us. Ordinarily, when you have functioning institutions and systems, the NRM party would have a functioning secretariat with its directorates, the way which is the director, they would be monitoring what government is doing, how the party programs are being implemented. They don't need a government to report some shode group at Protein Chadon. The moment you get the government to report to a political party, you're basically talking about regime capture. That's why you have even a guy like the head of Operation Wealth Creation, some informal guy, summoning a vice president and a prime minister and a minister for this and that. So that's the collapse, and it is exactly the way these things are coming, because you don't have a functioning government that is able to smartly deal with these kinds of transactions. That you reach a point and say, the Solicitor General says, I don't know about that agreement. I mean, it's so frustrating and actually annoying that for us as Ugandan taxpayers, the Solicitor General says, I don't know about this agreement. It's so annoying that for me as a farmer, my Minister of Agriculture says, I don't know what this agreement. The supply that the guy of finance, and this guy of finance, Matia Kasaija, actually made very belittling and annoying statements about the Minister for Agriculture.
Yes, that
he
he should be in charge of rearing rabbits.
Kasaija is signing to supply coffee which he doesn't even understand. So the dysfunction of government in this country, because of the guys like Awich is in the NRM secretariat, whatever it is for me what I find frustrating. And as Ugandans, as citizens, as taxpayers, we need to become very, very aggressive in pushing back on this capture of our government by the NRM.
Now, let me first bring on Brenda before.
Yes. I just want to say this, that I'm a major, retired major, and therefore I think the discipline that we have. Now, you gave me a chance to speak because of my discipline. When my brother wanted to intervene, I looked on. But he talked on and on, he took over.
Okay, now I've given you, yes.
I've given me was supposed to.
Okay, I've given you the time now.
Make an intervention, you
allowed me to intervene, and I intervened.
Forever and ever.
Yes, so okay, now you can now conclude.
But you can see the discipline that we have in NRM. That you are there,
but you said
if somebody wants to intervene, you keep room and you take over on and on.
Let's get to the discussion.
Okay, fine. What I wanted to say.
Which said is disciplined as a major of the UPDF, not as an NRM.
Retired major. So the discipline. Now, Godbar says the party should monitor. He used the keyword monitor. Now, the choice of the methods of monitoring is upon us. But for us, we still believe as a party that when we told people during election, if you vote us, we shall make 10,000 roads. And we form a government and we said, Minister of Works do this. It is upon us to check with the Minister of Works, did you make the road we promised the people? If you call it monitoring, how we do it doesn't matter. But for us, we do believe that we went in our manifesto to promise people 10,000 tarmac roads. Ministry of Works, what are you doing? He calls it monitoring. How we do it is upon us. Now, on the aspect of coffee, is that I have said that the party, and by extension the government, means well to the people. Now, if an agreement of this side is signed, and I've said I've not studied it, I will study it. I told you that I have 2 more forums, and I've seen, many of you have seen in the press that the president says the caucus will meet. Some are saying the SEAC will meet. And I think that is when I will give my views. But
About
for now,
the Vinci.
yeah, for now, yeah, they said it will be discussed. If it is not discussed, you didn't hear it?
Where was the
What is
announcement?
amusing here?
Where was the
It's
announcement?
this is a contract. So what does NRM has to do with the contract side between government of Uganda and some investor?
The president himself said,
You
You
mean the
see-
president or the chairman of NRM?
okay, Museveni said,
Okay.
put the title, the tag that you want. Museveni said, and that is always the practice, is that when there is a controversial issue that affects the country, we look for a broader minds to discuss.
And that's the sec.
We can choose. We said, brothers and sisters, this issue seems to be a matter of national importance. And therefore, as the president or as the chairman of the party, I don't want to take a unilateral decisions. What is your views? And is right. So if such an opportunity comes, and if I've studied, I will give in my input. But now I have said I've not studied it, but I just want to give an overarching comment that NRM means well for the people. So if this does not augur well with the people, you will hear the decision that will be taken in an appropriate forum at the right time.
Maybe I can inform, just information
Okay.
for Afande. 2 aspects of information. One is that the president is the one who recommended Da Vinci to Parliament, and even they convened a special session to pass the guarantee.
Of the same NRM caucus.
Yes, caucus and then the special session of Parliament to pass the guarantee over the fake Godbar hospital on the recommendation of the president. The second issue is that the Ministry of Finance signed this agreement, still on the same recommendations. But the 2 questions ring around the first and second information. One is that do we have capacity to do due diligence of the people that we introduce to Ugandans as reputable investors? In 2017, URA did a due diligence investigation when the same Da Vinci was requesting for tax exemptions. And the URA unit established that she was a briefcase business. But also a quick search on the open corporates globally, you find 4 companies where Da Vinci is a member, but inactive member. And her membership to most of these companies does not go beyond 2 years. So that imputes 2 things. Either she does not have money to purchase shares, or she's in these companies as hiding there to launder money in less developed countries.
Interesting.
These companies are in Cyprus, Panama, and 2 companies in the United Kingdom. In all of them, she's an inactive member.
Brenda, since you deal so much on these policy-related issues around investment and trade, how does the public-private partnerships work? And in this arrangement, how does this contract bind into this PPP?
To start with, and I think one of the reasons that actually raises worries is we don't see this particular agreement coming out as a PPP, but rather as a purely private company just coming in place. So in the first place, there is not a PPP where I would feel that maybe government has a share in this. It is only government coming out to give incentives to a purely private company. So it strikes out the idea of a PPP. But unlike a fund that says he has not made an analysis of the bill, I've personally taken time to make an analysis of this agreement and try to make sense out of it. So for me, I've observed it in two dynamics. The outside bit of it, but also the content of the agreement. And I think most importantly is the outside, because like Sarah and Godbar said, this whole agreement is just, I would say it's just a sham, even before you go into it. Now, government made a commitment under the tax expenditure governance framework that where such incentives are to be awarded, first of all, it will be, for instance, coming in to solve a particular problem. And for me, that has been my major question throughout these discussions. What is the problem that the coffee farmers are facing, or the coffee sector in Uganda is facing? And how does this company that we see being given all these incentives, how does it come to solve those problems? Now, Godbar talked about them, I think, deeply because of the fact that he's a player in the sector, and mentioning things to do with quality, input, access to financing, quite broad issues. And value addition is just one of them. But also, even when we talk about value addition, one major challenge we've seen in place is even those that add value, we have limited market for value-added coffee because the global market is not willing to receive our coffee after we've added value. They want it raw because they have the capacity to do the value addition and bring it back to us for consumption. So for me, that raises the first question of, is this company coming in to solve our major challenges that we face along the coffee sector?
In the agreement, it says she will also export raw beans.
Yeah, exactly. And now I want to come to that. I want to come to that when I get into the agreement. But that's the broader picture of it. One, what we see is our major problem is not value addition. So probably there is no justification for all these incentives. When you get into the agreement itself, to start with, like she said, I personally didn't see the company seal. So those are some of the legal things we could maybe rely on to go to court and say and challenge this particular agreement. Two, I believe that anyone who understands legal terms or legal aspects understands that you don't make an agreement and don't talk about termination. When you read this particular agreement, it does not in any way talk about what happens, what could lead to termination of this particular agreement. And that raises questions. What happens in case this company does not meet the obligations that it does? Government has not put in place any mechanism to say maybe failure to do as required, then maybe you'll be terminated. There are actually no obligations in any way other than awarding the incentives. When you, and the other key issue is, like when you look at part 3 of this particular agreement, it first of all talks about the tons. Now, it talks about 60 tons.
60,000.
Last year, I think Uganda's exports for the entire coffee was about 299 tons. So 60 is just a small portion of it. Now, it goes on to say that...
but 60 of the level 18.
Yes, yes. But it also goes on to say that where they have been able to, get that, which is up to the installed capacity, then they can go on and export the green coffee beans. Now, for me, that raises questions. And for me, I feel this is actually not majorly for value addition. I feel this is a way of trying to tap into the market and look at how best they can take out these players that are into exportation. Because if you're saying 60%, and we are saying Uganda's capacity was, like for last year, we're looking at about 290 tons. It means you're leaving out over 200 tons. But now this company can buy 200 tons and it can be able to maybe add value to 60%, which from actually they said 27 to 60. And then when they feel it is to their full capacity, then they can be able to export maybe the 200 tons as green raw coffee. Now, the question still comes back, where does that leave the local investor? Because it means now, that is the clear explanation of the monopoly itself, because this person will want to buy from everyone, and they'll have the capacity to take. Two, and especially when you look at part 4 of the contract that talks about that brings out and explains majorly on the incentives that are awarded. On the issue of land, this company is not just given land, but it's also given an opportunity to use the land as it deems fit. I do not know what amounts to deeming fit, but I feel that this company can go beyond what is talked about in this agreement, because that clause that says deems fit, probably they will practice whatever they want. And back to the first question I put across, does it solve the problems that the coffee sector is facing? Definitely not, if they chose to use the land differently. Two, there's the other one is an issue on the premium price that is also mentioned, that it will buy us at a premium price. But the question that lingers in my mind is, what amounts to premium price? Because much as they add on to say as shall, well, not high as that put by the regulating body, it still leaves questions. And for me, I think that laws or agreements should not be ambiguous or vague in nature. They should come out to clearly explain. So those are some of them. There's even an issue of the lease. And one thing we're asking, when you read this agreement, it says in case this company wants to maybe sell,
Yes.
it may sell back to government. So government is like given first priority, but for the lawyers that understand these terms, when they say may
is not mandatory.
it's not it's best endeavor. So they may sell to government, they may decide
not.
to. And where does that leave us as government?
So they're given free land.
Yes.
They were given free land.
Yes.
So in the time when
on a lease of 49
years,
49 years.
when the 49 years ends, when they want to
before they even end.
Yes.
If after 10 years they decide to leave
change and want to leave,
yes,
they have to resell.
They may. So the question is, why isn't it at least made mandatory? And I think it even goes back to the question you were asking. You see, when we have all these discussions, what we would want to see at the end of the day, for us to try and maybe put this agreement to like an equilibrium, would say, okay, how is Godbar as a local investor benefiting even when we have this foreign investor? Could we at least have seen maybe instances of a PPP, seeing government working jointly with this particular investor, so that we know that even, because what we usually see is these companies are awarded tax incentives. When the tax holiday is done, they repatriate their profits and they go away. So what are we left with? Definitely nothing. So for me, I feel those are some of the major challenges that this particular agreement has. And if we don't, I think we can go to court and challenge it, because it has a lot of clauses that pose those questions. But then even Afande had asked a question on how come we're talking about, like, we are bringing in on board third parties. Because when you read still part 3 of this agreement, it shows you that this is actually binding to even the local farmers out there. And on the issue of supply, saying that they will be given first priority. And those that have had those licenses existing shall not be able to go on.
Those licenses are nullified by the clause.
Now, one thing that one of the people I interacted with shared was most of these, especially the exporters, they have agreements with, maybe you're exporting to someone in Egypt. You have an agreement, you have that license, and they say before even giving you that contract, you must show them the license. Now, when you say this one has been nullified, first of all, it means you will not be able to because they're not going to trust you as the key person that can export to them if you don't have the license. But two, they already have the commitments to this particular person they are exporting to. So when you nullify the license, it means this person is actually indebted. So where are we leaving out the players, the exporters that have been into this? But then there has also been a question of We know we have some of the leading exporters in a country like Uganda, like mentioning most of those. When we are talking about such a deal that we say we caught, it comes in place to maybe particularly contribute to value addition. Why don't we entrust such resources to those companies that have been in place and existing? Because for me, one other thing I find is, I think it's important that we even get to carry out investment audits. We cannot just keep coming here and say, Lowawa didn't work, now this didn't work, but then we are giving them another contract. I think it would be important, and that's actually one other thing we've always advocated for, to see in the investment code. Can we advocate for investment audits so that before an investor comes in place, we know their background, the investments they've been done, and even before awarding these huge tax incentives, so that at least we are assured that this is a company that has been operating, and giving them these incentives is going to help them. Because also one other challenge, and especially on the part of exporting, when you allow them to export the green coffee beans, on top of awarding them all the tax incentives and even committing to pay to those that are not catered for under the laws, you're giving them an added advantage, and that creates an inequality gap, because this person is not fairly competing with the other players who are also into exporting. Today I saw, I think, a letter put out by UCDA saying that it will be increased from 1% to 2%. So they even
What are they increasing?
It's like a tax on when you're exporting. So, and some comments that were coming out, people saying, okay, you're increasing the taxpayers' money. You, the local investor, is having to incur these costs. Someone is being awarded all these huge tax incentives. The incentives are not regulated. And I know that's something that cuts across, because this whole neoliberal approach, we look at the moment we privatize, even government gives away its right to regulate. And we've seen in most instances, that's why we are having conversations of escalating commodity prices, because government can't even come in place to regulate. One other thing is, we are already stuck with certain agreements, like commitments government made under the contract it has with Umeme, which have, that even today, if Umeme decided to leave, the government would still pay. If they decided to terminate, government would still pay. So we are seeing this coming up again in this particular agreement. And you know, at the end of the day, this comes out to pinch with the citizens, and especially the local investors or the communities themselves, because it is we that are remitting these taxes. So for me, I think, whereas we may challenge this agreement, because chances are high that we mention mafias and the politics that surrounds it, that it will still go on. I think if we are to look at an angle of it still going on, we need to open it up, review most of these particular clauses of this agreement. And for instance, we need to scrap out the whole idea of them exporting the green coffee beans. Because one, it doesn't in any way address the issue why this company is coming, where it talks about value addition, and two, it creates that disadvantage. So can we scrap out such particular clauses within this agreement, so that, because one thing we can't do away with, and like Godbar mentioned, is we need to attract these foreign investments. But also when we attract them, we need to regulate them. And we need to make sure that our policies speak or contribute to improving the livelihoods of the people. And this inequality that we have cannot stop if we still go on to create agreements that are just towards protecting one person. That is the economic model that we've always had in place, where we see it is only geared towards profit making and creating that inequality, a lot of people being left out and not benefiting. So right now, the problem we are going to face with this, and which we have already faced, we have the Coffee Act. When you look at it, it majorly focuses on increasing our coffee exports bags to 20 million bags by 2025. I think that doesn't come in to help maybe someone that is, it's only focusing on commercial agriculture, who is that is practicing on a large scale. And even when we talk about local investors, there's a difference between Godbar Shenga and maybe my grandmother somewhere in the village. There are those people that don't even understand issues of maybe prices. When you say that prices as put out by the authority, some people don't even know what it means. They've only been dealing with these middlemen who will come and determine. And now it's going to become worse because it's one person. It's not that you even have options and say that if this one is giving me a cheap price, then I can be able to sell to the other one. So I think we are already having inequalities and these gaps that are existing, and having in place such agreements, and not just these, the lower agreements. The only thing we see is it affecting or touching on the livelihoods of the people, and in one way or the other, the communities and the local investors getting to lose more and not being able to earn anything as a country in terms of revenue.
Yeah,
Can I book
Brenda.
you make your presentation in the caucus?
Interesting.
I would want people to hear your views.
Good, but I want to because in part 8, my interest as she raised something that has tickled me. In part 8, where there is exercise of transfer option, they say option of to sell and transfer the plant to government. Yeah, these people have they have the authority to sell and transfer. At what point does government come? Because if we are leasing, they've given free land, and they have given you all these incentives. Yeah. Then at the end of the day, when these people are coming out of business or closing shop, they are opting again to sell to you, even after you have given all these incentives for free.
And
Is it
maybe
viable?
Godbar can also tell us the coffee marketing board warehouse in Bugolobi, when it was given in another dubious deal to Kananathan, who owns it now?
I even have no idea, but that's how all these things work. And actually, if you read the land, the provisions related to land in the agreement, it basically says the land is transferred fully to the company. The company owns the land.
And they use it as they deem fit.
Yes, and they can use it as they deem fit, even if the operation ended. The company owns the land.
Is it the case with all these other land leased across with the Uganda Investment Authority? Or this is just an isolated case?
It's an isolated
because
case.
it's an isolated case in the sense that it's a signed agreement between the government of Uganda
And itself.
and itself.
And it
actually.
has witnesses.
Yeah? Yes. So, but you see, I think as I said earlier, let me put it this way: that one, we run the danger of not dealing with the problem by focusing on the clause by clause of the agreement. Because for me, this agreement is neither here nor there. From in both in terms of content, but also in terms of structure, and we've seen, as Sarah pointed out, in terms of the signing, you are looking at a fraud that is an agreement. So everything is questionable as far as this agreement is concerned. So the fundamental issues that we need to be dealing with is where this places the coffee sector and those people who are participating are engaged in the sector. You see, we have experiences. There was the sale of UCB. It raises the same amount of controversy. UCB was being sold to a fictitious company called Westmont Asia. At that point, the government of Uganda lost its leverage to play in the commercial banking sector. Today, government of Uganda has no capacity to regulate or to impact on the interest rates in the financial sector. I think Ugandans need to look at this from a very, very strategic perspective. Not somebody who jumps around and steals money all over the place by using these deals. This is a financial sector. A financial sector is the heart of an economy. If you have a government or a state that has no capacity to play in the financial sector, you are basically still dealing with a fraud that calls itself a government. 2, we had umeme. We dismantled Uganda Electricity Board with its inefficiencies. But the government had control over the sector. Electricity, water, telecommunications, banking, these are strategic sectors of an economy. In fact, wherever you go across this world, these are sectors that you don't just liberalize, that you let every Tom, Dick, and Harry and play because you are pursuing a liberalization policy. I think that's a failure. The moment government fails, or the state, in its broadest sense, fails to establish a foothold in these utility sectors, you are basically endangering the national security of this country. Now, I place coffee in the same category. Coffee is not beans, is not soya bean or vanilla. Coffee is coffee. Yeah, coffee is coffee. When we write our stories and the history and whatever, we say your coffee is Uganda's leading foreign exchange earner. That's not. It's not just for passing exams. Otherwise, why would we be studying it? Coffee is a strategic, economic, and national security crop. Because of the so many people involved, because of the revenues that it generates. I think that a smart government would be looking for mechanisms on how does government remain an active player in the coffee sector? 2, how do you increase the participation of Ugandan coffee players, the actors in the coffee sector, in this kind of venture? 3, how do you interest people to go and grow more coffee? So, as far as I'm concerned, the government actually has even tried to divert us from the real discussion by by engaging in a mafia operation around that. It's called this is a mafia operation that we are doing. We are going to do value addition. Yeah, if you read that agreement, it is about that the government, based on the promises of the company, we are giving you land, guaranteeing you coffee that we don't have, that is all grown on private farms. We are going to block other exporters.
Until you've had enough.
We are, so in other words,
shall pay for any. There is a clause
we are exempting you from tax.
In 412. But where the law does not allow tax exemption, then government commits to pay that tax.
That we are exempting you from any tax or charges. I mean, it's obnoxious.
Where there is a power shortage and you make a loss.
Actually,
government will pay.
Just one thing I forgot. It talks about employment. And then it says the company shall be employing about 265.
246.
Yes.
246.
The investment code says you should employ at least 60% of Ugandan citizens for it to qualify for incentives.
They have an exemption.
This one is already saying at least as long as there are 200. So assuming they're employing 1,000 people, it means this is a small portion of those. And it's a contradiction to what is provided for under the investment code. But all those things are not...
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. For me, this is a mafia operation. That every Ugandan who is employed, you have to pay NSSF. Every Ugandan. NSSF goes around harassing even small businesses, startups of Ugandans, and Minister of Finance sits there and signs off an agreement and says a company that is claiming there is a business here and we're going to do business and add value, and you are exempting them from paying NSSF.
Yes,
That means that you, Ugandan, as a taxpayer, Ugandan taxpayers are going to be paying NSSF for the company. Yeah? When the company files its reports to claim payment, they will even claim for NSSF, and we will be paying for the employees of the company. I don't understand, because I think that the people who signed on this agreement don't love this country. I'm convinced that you can't have gone to school, you can't love this country, and then sign on this agreement. With all due respect, I have issues.
I think this contract will be discussed for generations. It has broken all contractual obligations for the years.
But I think what we are looking at is somebody hiding behind the Vinci.
That's
still Uganda's
absolutely
top quality coffee.
Yes.
I think we should even
That's
take away. Yes,
this is a mafia operation. Yeah.
Because if you look at last year's performance of coffee, Uganda earned the foreign exchange to the tune of $658 million for selling 6.55 million bags of coffee. Our target for 2030 is 20 million coffee. So if you have mafias seated somewhere, and I know Ugandans, you know them, the economic hitmen of this country, seated somewhere scheming on how to benefit. Because just in the last 2 years, gold managed to overtake coffee as the highest export earner. But we also know that this is gold smuggled from DRC. So once DRC puts their act in order and is able to stop smuggling, coffee will again take its #1 place as Uganda's top foreign exchange earner. And Uganda still remains the top exporter of coffee in Africa and the 10th globally, because we export 10% of coffee on the global market. So the economic hitmen of Uganda have sat down and looked at coffee as the new gold, and they are trying to see how do we steal coffee from the farmer that is laboring to plant and everything, and we control export and control this amount of foreign exchange earning. So it is a scheme to steal the level 18 and above, the cream of Uganda's coffee by people, because that MOI says the investor has $80 million. But this is the same investor squandering Uganda's taxpayers' money through Rubowa Hospital. This is the same investor that confessed that she's not creditworthy and needed promissory note guarantees to secure money. So where does she get $80 million? And the agreement does not say that there is confirmation that this money exists.
Interesting.
So this coffee deal is a classic Rubowa case. These are cases of money laundering. So Ugandan taxpayers' money is basically laundered through these schemes. And that's what we are dealing with. And I think that Ugandans across this country, whether you are in the coffee industry or not, we need to put our foot down and say we are not going to donate our labor, our culture, our value, and donate it to some faceless entity called Uganda Vinci Company. Because as I think I agree with Sarah that there are people behind this lady, the way they were behind her in the Rubowa case, there are people behind her in this deal, basically to control the coffee trade, the coffee industry in the country, basically derive the value from something that they don't do. And if you are finding a definition of mafiaism, that's a classic definition of mafiaism.
Okay, our time is fast spent, and as we are turning into the conclusion and give the way forward for the investment climate in Uganda, which I will start with you, but also maybe for purposes of raising our hopes, since Rubowa didn't take off, we might also say that maybe this coffee thing will not also take off and people should not be
So are
worried.
we in a
But we have
trial?
lost, but we have lost money.
Is it a trial and
maybe
error?
those people are
Or
losing
But we
money.
lost money.
So I know the way forward.
Well, way forward, I want to make, first of all, a comment again that
I thought
in
you
the
would
further,
accept the fraud.
the further inquiry, I would want the parties, especially the government, since I said that there's a possibility of discussing, for me to be convinced that by signing this agreement, a mischief is being cured. We have put it in many aspects that what would it do to the sector and all this, because if the mischief is, for example, you are placing this agreement in the position of the former cooperative that had its role to do many good things that everybody talks about. Now, if the mischief, you are replacing one individual for a cooperative, then I'm yet to be convinced that this agreement makes a cures a mischief. But so far by discussion here, it looks like there's no mischief being cured. The other thing is that I want us, because we presume that we're all talking in the best interest of the country. Nobody hates Uganda, but we're just discussing for the best thing for the citizens. I want us to better find, because for example, you said that the clause about giving the land and selling back to the government stands alone. It has never been in any other agreement. I think researchers like you could find more, not only on the aspect of land, which other unique things that are not provided in other agreements for investment. You can take 5 cases. You can take 5 cases of other various agreements. Say this provision was not in this one. This provision was not in this. This one was not. Why this one? So I just call upon more research so that we give out these facts, because we are discussing for the good of the country. Because if we give out those facts, the flaws, then the decision makers, if they're really acting in, and we think so, for the best interest of the country, should go back to drawing board and say, no, I think there was some lacuna here. We put it right. The last comment I want to say is that there are some projects which take off. I wonder why others don't. For example, the hospital in Umbuya, that army hospital, when you go on that road going to Luzira through Nakawa Business School, there's a very, very good military hospital that would be to a standard of any hospital you have had around the world. Remember, most countries, even when a president is sick, the best hospital is always the military hospital. So we are doing it. So I'm wondering aloud that
why don't
I wish
we
we had
put
things which can take off like
equipment
that,
in that
because
hospital?
we do it. So the army is doing it. So I wonder why
we needed
others
the
cannot
Vinci.
take off like that.
The question is, why did we need the Vinci? Why didn't we get specialized equipment and put it in that army
resource
hospital?
we should have channeled.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that there are projects like the one you see, that army hospital has taken off. Everybody can see it, even if you went and visited it. So I wish we do that if we act in the best interest of the country. So as a way forward, therefore, I still want to reiterate that as a party, we worked in the best interest of the people, and these challenges we shall keep seeing how to go about it, discussing them, and I thank those who bring it up, because it would empower us, who we have delegated powers to, some people like the Attorney General, to say, hey, is this right? So I take it in good faith. I don't take it in bad faith, and I hope you do further research so that can enrich all of us, and we put it over there and see whether possibility of going back on the drawing board.
Thank you very much, Awich. Sarah?
Well, I think the way forward, in my view, one is that some people, just to leave the benefit of the doubt, otherwise I would have said everybody. Let's protect those that we haven't seen exhibit such a malice and bad intentions against fellow citizens. Some people do not wish you well, and they do not have your interests at heart, and neither can they have your back. We have selfish monsters in this government that think of themselves. Some people earn commissions from such dubious deals, Others are the real faces behind the dubious deals. It's very unfortunate. But for the citizen out there, you own the coffee. Plus, you have sovereign rights in this country. We need to work hard and collectively to get rid of the mafia in the country.
Thank you very much, Sir Godbar.
Yeah, so no, I think I speak as a coffee farmer, but also as a policy analyst. I think that what the people in government have tried to do, because I want to still convince myself that this is not government of Uganda as defined under the constitution. Because if it was government of Uganda, I am sure the Minister of Agriculture would be working with the Minister for Finance, the Solicitor General
And the Minister for Trade
would be involved, the Minister for Trade would be involved. I think the strategic nature of the coffee crop, this is one transaction where you would need even a decision of cabinet to be able to move in this direction, because this is a strategic crop. Some of my sources actually tell me that even the record of this company
Da Vinci.
in the company registry is non-existent. Yes. So in other words, we have a person.
Sorry, it's not
Yeah.
registered.
No, the record is non-existent. You can't.
They
access
just have a certificate.
you can't access the record. Yeah, and this is important because you see, when you go back to the signing, the person, the chairman of the board of directors, signs as a witness. It would be interesting to know who are the directors of the company.
Criminal intentions.
Do they actually exist? So I think that I want to appeal to Ugandans that on this coffee issue, we need to be very resilient. This is one of those. This is one of those cases where we even need to take our MPs hostage. So if an MP comes to my village, I should be there saying, "What have you done on this coffee deal?" Because Uganda's, I think the freedom of Ugandan coffee farmers should not be jeopardized by a mafia operation of elements within this regime. It should be resisted to the end. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Godbar. And finally, Brenda.
Thank you. I think to start from the last thing that Godbar talked about, let's lift the veil of this company, get to understand what is behind this company, who is behind it, but also most importantly, let's use this as an opportunity to look into our policies that we have in place, especially those governing investments, so that even what is not right, especially when it comes to the protection of the local investors and the citizens, the communities, let's make sure that we prioritize those rights and we incorporate all those into our investment guiding frameworks.
Without reopening the debate, I want to ask Godbar a quick question. With the digitalization of the URSB data, registered companies appear online.
Yeah.
So what appears when this company and the directors appear online as well?
No, I've tried to search the company, and then if a couple of things come up, so I've actually asked someone who is more qualified to do the search and see.
The physical search at the bureau.
To do the physical search at the bureau. Because in most cases, what these kinds of companies do is that they tend to incorporate as subsidiaries of other companies. Yeah. So you may find that Da Vinci company, coffee company, is owned by another company and another company and another company. So it is you begin to lose track of who the real shareholders and directors are.
There is a warning on the internet by Da Vinci company in France, which has 128 subsidiaries. It has a warning that it has come to their attention that somebody is using the Da Vinci name to defraud governments, especially in the less developed countries. And there is a crisis case going on in Chad involving the same investor that we are discussing now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awich, you have a lot of take home for your caucus
For the
meeting.
caucus, yeah.
And I think you can do much more. And of course,
Actually,
to
I
our
was
viewers out there.
Please, just in
I
case
was asking her to give
in case-
me bullet points.
Yeah,
no,
you know,
in case the situation allows, please allow us to come in as a panel and talk to the caucus.
Thank you very much, my dear panelists, for sparing time to join us today. But also importantly, for our viewers out there who are always tuned on to this conversation every Friday. If there's anything that can unite us, and if we always look for something that can unite us, I think this is what should unite us, given the history behind the coffee and the coffee exports and the whole coffee growing in Uganda. It is a crop that really seals and gives us the map. It's what has risen our flag everywhere. So it is where maybe possibly we need to unite as a country and put all the forces that needs to be to protect this sector. And of course, here at the Civic Space TV, we thank you very much, and we say kindly follow the conversations. We are still on the Twitter, Chat Show UG, also on the hashtag Civic Space TV, but also importantly on our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV is on there. Please be part of the conversations. Let's have this conversation. Let's push as much as possible, and we see to it that we get the best out of this coffee business. My name is Masesa Demiano, your show host every Friday here. May God bless Uganda.